I am super high on Derrick Henry this week. Vinnie is loving Bucky Irving. We tell you why, plus get into the rest of our running back fantasy rankings for week 15 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcasting network. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Today, we're getting into our running back rankings for week 15. A lot of us are, starting our first round of the fantasy playoffs. This week is very important. You win and you're still in. You lose and you're out. So let's get you that win. At the top of our running back rankings, we both have Christian McCaffrey and Bijan Robinson to start at 1 and 2. Then it goes Devon Achane for me if he's playing in this game. It sounds like his rib injury isn't too serious. It stinks he doesn't play till Monday night, so hopefully we don't have to hopefully he's not questionable and we have to deal with all that. But I have him at 3 if he plays. You have him at 8, a little bit lower. Then we both have Jahmyr Gibbs at 4. You have James Cook at 3 ahead of him, and I have Cook at 6. But then this is where we start to get a little bit different. At number 5, I have Derrick Henry against the Bengals. You have him at 12. Well, we kind of had this flip-flop with you having Bucky Irving at 5 and me, I have him at 16, which might be a little low. But Vinny, tell me why you're so high on Bucky Irving this week.
Yeah, I think the Bucks messed around a little bit with the Saints. They don't want to do that again this week. And Bucky Irving has been dominating the key touches here in the backfield. We know he can take over games. They're going to be at home. And look, the Falcons have just been hemorrhaging points to running backs of late. I mean, they gave up that 244-yard game to Jonathan Taylor in Germany or Spain or wherever that game was played, I think Germany. And then we go back to just last week. I mean, they could have had a bigger game on the ground. The Seahawks, they just threw and got nuts there to pull away in that game in Atlanta with a lot of Zach Charbonnet. He was actually running well. They just didn't give him or Kenneth Walker a lot of work in that game. It's a bizarre offense, I'll say this, but most teams have been able to run on the Falcons, dominate with like power, strength, speed. That's the kind of profile that Bucky Irving has. Again, they've been caught and they're back at home. I don't know what was wrong with that turf, but that turf was disgusting.
Yeah, it was.
So I think they need to get muddier here this week. Just put this game away early. They don't want to invite the Falcons. They remember kind of how Kirk Cousins was competitive with them last year. They don't want that stuff. So I think Irving's going to be a big part of the reality game plan to try to put this game away. And then that's why Baker Mayfield should be solid because he'll have the play action playing a lot off of that with Irving. But I think Irving gets at least a touchdown and 100 yards from scrimmage in this game.
Yeah, we'll see. I think he's more injured than we know. He keeps going in and out of games with injuries, and then they put in a lot of Sean Tucker and Rashad White last week. The only thing that saved him the last 2 weeks is getting a touchdown in both of those games, and that's what he needs if he's going to finish inside the top 12 because it's been 15 points and 15 points, which you're perfectly happy with, and that will get you around running back 11, 12. But and I have him at 16 because if he doesn't come down with that touchdown, he's going to really disappoint. His efficiency has been bad. That's just my worry is that he's just not as healthy as we want him to be. Now, Derrick Henry against the Bengals, he should have a huge game. The Bengals are the worst defense against fantasy running backs. And just 2 weeks ago, Derrick Henry played him. The Ravens got their butts kicked. I mean, it was barely in the game. He only had 10 carries in the game, but still finished with 17 fantasy points in that game. So he was limited greatly because of the game script. And I think this game will be much closer. And if Derrick Henry can put up 17 points and 10 carries, I do think he can get 20 carries in this game. So I expect him to have a monster game this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the wave of the Ravens offense, their limitations and they make mistakes on the road again. How much can Barkley I'm sorry, Henrico. I'm getting ahead of myself. But a couple guys I do like ahead, and this is why Derrick Henry's down there. Really, I have several guys ahead, but Bucky Irving is one, but I also have Travis Etienne pretty high at 6. You have at 7. And Saquon Barkley, I have at 7. You have at 8. Look, we were down on Saquon Barkley. Maybe he got the message. He saw our rankings and said, I got to crush the Chargers. And he ended up being the only, well, A.J. Brown had 100 yards. But other than that, I mean, you had a terrible interception fest, including an interception and a fumble lost by Jalen Hurts on the same play. You had Devonta Smith just getting involved only late. Dallas Goedert did anything. But it was the Saquon Barkley show again, which is promising because that wasn't the easiest matchups. Now they get the Raiders. So Barkley should be getting well. I mean, you have Etienne against the Jets, and we said Dolphins matchup for Achane against the Steelers. I am in the top grouping as well as like Chase Brown. But like Barkley, I think is, I don't want to say he's back totally, but this matchup will say that he's back again. So it's good. Good timing for him to get going against the Chargers because I think he'll keep up that momentum and streakiness with the big plays against the Raiders. They got to keep in that fake tush push. That's a great play. That's the one he scored on with the 52. But the big play running Barkley can come back in this game for sure against the Raiders.
Yeah, the Raiders defense is so bad. It was good to see him get the workload last week. It scored a nice game at 18 points. And the Raiders the last 3 weeks, they allowed Kamani Vidal to score 20 points, which Derek Patterson in that same game for the Chargers also had 12 points. So combined 20 or 33 points in that game between those two. RJ Harvey put up 19 points against them. And then Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson combined for over 32 fantasy points against the Raiders in week 12. So they've been just giving away fantasy points to running back. So really like Barkley this week. Now, Omarion Hampton, I am much, much higher on than you. Yeah, I have him at running back 10. You have him all the way down at running back 24. First week back with only 31% of the snaps played because they brought him back slowly. And, they split work together with Kamani Vidal. He was a running back 16 last week. So I do think his snaps will probably double this week in the second game back. I get it. The Chiefs can be stingy against running backs, but they're not dominant. I don't think they're dominant against the run. So I like Hampton. I think they're going to have to keep leaning on the run game with Herbert's injury to his hand. I think he's a top 10 play this week.
Yeah, I just want to see what that split comes to be, and I'm not sure that the Chargers can get that touchdown that they were able to produce last week against the Eagles. So that's what I'm worried about. It's in Kansas City. It could be a bit of a grindy, low-scoring game, especially the fronts. The offensive lines are struggling. So that's the game I think is going to be rather low-scoring between Herbert and Mahomes. So I don't want to necessarily attach myself too much to that game, but Hampton, again, I don't think he'll totally phase out Vidal. I think he'll have a key role in this team. Now, one guy we haven't talked about at all, and he barely makes Michelle's top 12. He's outside of my top 12, behind the aforementioned Derrick Henry. It's Jonathan Taylor. Now, Michelle, since the bye, that big game against Atlanta somewhere in Europe, 244 yards rushing. He hasn't had that total combined in the last 3 games after the bye. This has been tough sledding. He's a little bit big game dependent, which we're starting to learn. And I don't know if you can say he's going to have a big game in this matchup either against Seattle. But the problem is, Michelle, they need to throw to him last week. They just totally forgot to just dump off, check down, do something. You were trailing, get him going. They didn't do that with Riley Leonard. So maybe Phillip Rivers will remember. He'll start treating him like Danny Woodhead or Darren Sproles and get him going. But I don't know. It's tough. He's got to get it done. A, catching the ball a few times, and B, scoring, I think, to really come through this week.
And that's the issue. How many opportunities are the Colts really going to have to score in this game against the Seahawks defense? Now, running backs and tight ends can put up fantasy points against the Seahawks. Wide receivers cannot. But, Seattle has allowed the 6. Well, no, actually, running backs can't put up points. I was reading this wrong. They've allowed the 6 fewest points per game to running back. So it's really just tight ends that can do it against the Seahawks. And with Taylor, like you brought up, it's been a bad 3 weeks since the bye. And I just don't see it getting any better unless Phillip Rivers just gives him 8 targets in this game and he breaks one off. So we're still keeping him as a good, if you're running back 12 or 13, you were fine. It's just not what you were getting at the beginning of the year where he was winning you weeks.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, it's a tough sled in the playoffs, man. It's not just this week. The 49ers, if you get through that, you got the Jaguars again. They just shut them down. They're the number one run defense. And if your league plays into week 18, you got to see the Texans. So it's not great here for Jonathan Taylor. We'll talk about some guys in that RB2 range we're a little bit higher on, a little bit maybe lower on. We'll get into that after this break.
There's no reason to let big wireless strain your wallet, especially during the holidays. Right now, Mint Mobile is running their best deal of the year. All of their unlimited plans are 50% off. That means you can lock in 3, 6, or even 12 months of unlimited premium wireless for just $15 a month. It's the easiest way to take your overpriced phone bill and give it to the full Scrooge treatment. And what makes this even better is how simple Mint makes the switch. No contracts, no nonsense, just real savings and real quality service. Switching to Mint lets you keep your same coverage for a lower price, and it takes only a few minutes to set up. You can bring your own phone, keep your own number without any issues. Turn your expensive wireless present into a huge wireless savings by switching to Mint. Shop Mint Unlimited plan at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. Limited time offer. There's an upfront payment of $45 for the 3-month, $90 for 6-month, or $180 for the 12-month plan. Required. That's equivalent to $15 a month. Taxes and fees apply. Initial plan term only. Greater than 35 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com for more information. I want to thank you all again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcasting network. You already live your fantasy team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Fantasy Football with no interruptions, members only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month. Or you can do $50 a year if you want to save that way. Go to lockedonfantasyfootball.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. Let's continue our running back rankings for week 15. I was shocked by this, that Rico Dowdle you have so high. So after Omarion Hampton, I have Kyron Williams, Jonathan Taylor, Javonte Williams, Chase Brown. We're pretty similar on those guys, right? They're all solid plays this week. But Rico Dowdle is one that we are different on. You have him at number 15 against the Saints. I am all the way down at 26. I'm worried about his usage over the last couple of weeks and Chuba Hubbard taking back over that backfield.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about the usage, but maybe they'll also say, like, we need to correct this a little bit more and get Rico Dowdle going. So I'm hopeful after the bye that they'll use him more. I'm also hopeful that they'll be playing with a lead this time. They struggled in the first matchup with the Saints. So then you get enough. Chuba Hubbard, look, I don't know why they forced him back in there. Maybe they were paying. I know it did add up a little bit to some good results, but I think Dowdle is a more explosive runner. I don't understand. He's the guy that can help take over games. So I think that's a correction they have to make this week to be a little bit more consistent with that and bring in Chuba Hubbard less often into the game. So let's hope they make this adjustment. But I do like the upside here of Dowdle. I think his running style and just his explosiveness can guide him a little bit more and have a more productive game against the Saints. So, yeah, I don't like these fickle backfields at all. Like, just go with the guy that is clearly the better one. Don't just force a guy in there just because you're paying him money.
Yeah, I know. And Dowdle's production has fallen off a little bit and Hubbard looks a little bit better. So I get them going more to a split backfield. I'm just I'm not like thrilled to play Dowdle. I think he's a viable option as a guy, like if you need someone in your RB2 spot, but he's not a guy I'm trying to get into my flex. Like I don't think his upside is all that high at the moment with the workload split. Now, Travion Henderson, RJ Harvey, Quinshon Junkins, Woody Marks, like all these rookies are becoming insanely important to our fantasy playoffs. And Henderson, gets a really nice matchup against the Bills. Unfortunately, Ramondre Stevenson is eating into work, but I still think he's a really good play. He's been far more efficient than Stevenson. RJ Harvey's getting all the work. Now the last two matchups have been really great for him, and this is going to be much tougher against the Packers, but he's still a good play. I have Henderson at 15, RJ Harvey at 17. You have Harvey at 20 with Henderson at 19. The real talking point here is Quinshon Judkins, because last week we were excited about him. We thought, he had a nice matchup against the Titans, but his workload diminished, only 14 carries. It was a close game even, only 45% of snaps. He is, his production has just gone down. His efficiency has been terrible. So what do you do with Judkins?
Yeah, another strange situation developing, and partly maybe they're trying to evaluate Shedeur Sanders as much as possible and throw the ball and look at that quite a bit down the stretch here, where I think Quinshon Judkins, you know what he kind of is, and power back, and Dylan Sampson to catch the ball. That's probably going to be a chunk of their offense with Fan and maybe Sanders. We'll see how it plays out going forward for 2026. But yeah, Judkins should be doing more. The matchup is the Bears. The Bears, however, are really bad against the run. So maybe that gives them an opportunity. They give up more than 130 yards per game. The Bills, we know, are one of the worst in the AFC. The Bears are kind of that NFC answer that you can run them. Really, that's the only way you can consistently move the ball to the Bears. They really are pretty good at just creating some havoc and some turnovers and all that. So I think they want to keep the protection there. And I think getting play action on all the things that help Sanders really rely on Judkins. So I think he'll be okay. Again, sometimes it's the combination. You need everything working: the matchup, the talent, the player usage, all these things. And right now, there's some vague situations that we're just trying to make the best out of, and this is one as well. But I think he's definitely playable as an RB2. We both have him at 18, by the way. Travion Henderson, for me, a little bit behind. You have him at 15 ahead of Bucky Irving. So, again, we'll see how these play out. It's hard when you have other guys and the way they use these guys. It's very different. Now, Woody Marks is a guy that, as a rookie, we had a lot of promise for, but now things are lining up better for him. The matchup here is pretty good against the Cardinals, and Nick Chubb all of a sudden is kind of more of a limited factor. You like Marks this week. I do too. How are you willing to go? You have at, I think, RB19. Mm-hmm. I am at 25. So, but to me, he's still playable in a lot of leagues.
Yeah, I like him this week. I don't think he has like super high ceiling. His efficiency just hasn't been there all year long, and we'll see how the scoring opportunities for him. But Nick Chubb's hurt, rib injury. Obviously, I like Marks a lot more if Chubb is out. The Cardinals they're getting beat up on by running backs, and they've allowed the fourth most points per game to running backs this year. We just saw Blake Corum have a career high day against them, with Kyren Williams still doing his thing as well. So Woody Marks last week, 26 carries, played almost 90% of the offensive staff. So Nick Chubb getting hurt early in that game. So I really like Woody Marks this week as a RB2 type play. Now, I say that while having him right next to Ashton Jeanty in my rankings. I have Woody Marks at 19, ahead of Ashton Jeanty at 21. In between them, I have DeAndre Swift at 20. You have Swift at 16. He's been a solid play, and the Browns you can run on. So keep going with Swift. But with Ashton Jeanty, it's all over the place with this man. He's been so inconsistent, such a headache if you took him early. And 3 of the last 4 weeks have been a massive disappointment from him, with the one good game coming against the Browns in week 12. And most of that production came through the air, right? And it's been inconsistent mostly with his targets, and the efficiency on the ground has been so bad. And unless he scores a touchdown, it's just not been fun. But the Eagles, they are giving up points to running back. So What do you do with Ashton Jeanty? It's so confusing.
I think you play like we're playing Saquon Barkley. We put him in, hope for RB1 numbers, and just hope for the best. Here you look for Jeanty, hope for RB2 numbers. The matchup, he's okay. Same game for both these guys, Barkley and Jeanty. Again, the Eagles just gave up a pretty good combined game to Omarion, Hampton, and Kamani Vidal. So I think just looking at this, I feel okay about Jeanty. I can't feel great about it. I think, again, the rushing may be ineffective, but they'll throw to him, give him a chance to score a touchdown in garbage time and all that. So he's okay. You just have to keep him, stay the course as an RB2 this week.
Yeah. After Jeanty, I have Breece Hall at 22, Jaylen Warren at 23. You have Hall at 21, Jalen Warren at 22 against the Dolphins. So very similar there, but two guys were a little bit different on. I mean, Devin Neal, you have at 23. I don't have him much further below that. I think he's a fine play, but Devin Singletary is one guy that we need to discuss. I really, really like him this week. You're a little bit lower. So we'll get to that right after a quick break.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. You can get in the action, of course, on Thursday night as well. I do like the Buccaneers at home. They're 4.5-point favorites against the Falcons, who are fading. The Bucs need a win after losing to the Saints at home last week. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. The receiver gets hot, defense signs up, or the momentum flips after turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action down the stretch this NFL season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets down the stretch. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so do you. All right, Michelle, it's time to close the show and look at the case of Devin Singletary. Now, the Giants had a bye, but Singletary looks like now their healthiest running back. Cam Scadaboo's not in the picture after this bye, so they're getting the Commanders. It's a pretty good matchup. In fact, throwing it back, like Singletary's had some good success against the Commanders when relied upon to carry the load. That could happen again. You also figure the Giants, for a change, maybe playing with a lead in this one. So Singletary is kind of the running back. You don't necessarily have to worry about checkdowns to him. So what do you say this week about Singletary? I think we both think he's a strong borderline RB2 flex play.
Yeah, I'm at 24. You have him at 30. I really love the matchup. Now, Tyron, it did come out today that Tyrone Tracy will be good to go, it looks like, for this game. That's unfortunate for Devin Singletary. I mean, happy for Tyrone Tracy. I mean, I don't want anyone to be injured, but it would have made things a lot easier. But Singletary has been heavily involved, and it is a split backfield. So sure, maybe it'll be split again. But 2 of the last 3 weeks, Singletary has scored 17 fantasy points and half PPR against the Packers and against the Patriots. Those are not easy run defenses, and he's getting like the good touches as well, like the goal line touches for the Giants. So the Commanders giving up the 5th most points to running backs this year, and their defense has only gotten worse. I really like Singletary this week, and I think I like him over Tyrone Tracy, especially as well.
Yeah, this coaching staff still has an affinity for him, even with Brian Dable gone and Mike Kafka in charge here. There's still something about the way Singletary runs and finishes a little bit just better than what they get in Tyrone Tracy Jr. Now, Devin Neal, look, you're right on him. I didn't know what to get from him with the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers matchup did help, but he also ran with purpose. So did Tyler Shuck in that game. They both kind of were motivated, so which is good to see because we want the Saints to be viable. The Saints, pretty good stuff this week, and I think you trust Devin Neal for sure. They're at the Panthers. Panthers struggle on early downs with running back, so Devin Neal is definitely a guy that you can play. I mean, after all, he's getting the volume. They don't really have much else there in New Orleans, and they haven't really introduced the whole running quarterback wrinkle there. So I think you're okay with Devin Neal. His workload is pretty much that of a starter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think it's a nice matchup against the Panthers, who've allowed the tied for 8th most points per game to running backs this year. And he's getting the snaps, he's getting all the carries in the backfield. I don't think he has a super high ceiling. Like I do think last week with a 19 for 70 and a touchdown, that's what you're going for your 15 fantasy points. That would be, I do think that's pretty much his ceiling because he doesn't get a bunch of targets. He did in week 12, but like it's only been 4 total targets over the last 2 weeks, only 1 target this last week. So I wouldn't count on that. That's why I have him at 27. You have him at 23. He's a viable RB2 play, flex type of play. But again, not the highest ceiling, but I do think he will be solid enough. Now, Tony Pollard and Blake Corum both had massive games last week. Can we trust any of them this week? Pollard gets the 49ers, their middle of the pack against running backs, not like too scary. Corum gets the Lions, who have allowed the fewest points to running backs this year. And with Pollard, it was his first good game of the year. It took until week 14, and it was a great, massive game. And with Corum, he's still only playing 30% of the snaps. It's not like his snap count has gone up, but he's been more involved in the offense, had that monster game against the Cardinals with efficiency, but he's averaged 11 and 10 yards per carry the last 2 weeks. He's not going to be able to keep that up. So I think if he gets his 12 carries again, you're probably going to be pretty disappointed unless he gets a couple more touchdowns again.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely odd there with Blake Corum, where I don't know why everyone said flock to go get Blake Corum. I mean, Kyron Williams is still starting. Blake Corum is just going to do well when they have a blowout, right? They're kind of, again, the Rams are pretty old school, and that was an old school approach that they were in control against the Cardinals. Let's just put the backup running back, close out the game, right? That's the Sean McVay MO. Now, the Lions, I mean, they can turn this thing into a back and forth affair. The Lions are tough on running backs. So I just don't see, other than the premium handcuff, which he's laying out on a silver platter here, saying, hey, flashing lights, get him behind Kyron Williams. If Kyron Williams is out, Corum can totally explode. So that's what you have to think about. With Tony Pollard, again, I don't see him just reeling off those big runs that we saw. I mean, the Browns had a lot of aggressive breakdowns in defense. I think they'll talk about that with the 49ers this week to make sure that doesn't quite happen. So I'm not buying into the Pollard game at all. Now, two guys that I'm out on this week, despite maybe the matchups being a little bit okay. Chris Rodriguez, he just didn't show me enough where I want to trust him in a critical game like this against the Giants, even though the matchup was okay. And Kyle Monangai, look, we saw if they don't totally go off, there's going to be limited production there that you're going to get from him. And this week is not good because they get the Browns. I don't think, even if the Browns are not as good defensively on the road, I don't think you can trust two Bears backs in such a type of matchup here.
I think you can. I do think Kyle Manungai is in play. I mean, we just saw Pollard have a monster game against the Browns. I just said that Ashton Jeanty's only good game over the last month came against the Browns. I think at this moment, there is one concern for this Browns defense, and it's to get Myles Garrett the sack record. And I think Myles Garrett is just going all out for that sack in every single play, which is making it a lot easier to run the Browns because he's not playing against the run. He just wants to get that sack record. So, and fair for him, right? The Browns have no shot for the playoffs, so what do you care? But I do think Manungai is in play. He still got 14 carries last week. You would like to see him more involved in the receiving game. I just don't think that's going to happen. But last week was his first week. He didn't score a touchdown in any of the last 5 games. So I do think Manungai is in play. Rodriguez is such a low floor or low ceiling option. It is an amazing matchup. He is getting the majority of work in the backfield, but again, he's not used as a receiver either. He would have to score 2 touchdowns, not just one, for you to be happy with starting him. So a viable option, just not a great one. So Manungai I like more than Chris Rodriguez.
Yeah, let's hope Monangai can score. I think that's always going to be a little bit on him a little bit. He's kind of, again, Dave Montgomery in development at this point in this backfield. So that's my only concern is there going to be the pay dirt in this game where we know, again, this could be a bit low scoring. The elements, it's supposed to be really bad out there. So I just don't see a lot of movement of the ball. And look, he could be the guy that's preferred because they're going to pound away a little bit, but I just don't see enough points in this game. But again, I could be way off on this, but again, I don't love as much as possible working in a kind of a split backfield. Anything that could be tough this time of year, I think I'd prefer as much as possible get the one guy to play in these games if I'm in fantasy because again, you're trying to go for it all here, and I still think no matter what. One guy has a very capped production level in this game.
That's fair enough. That is it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for tuning in today to Locked On Fantasy Football. Tomorrow, we'll get into our Week 15 wide receiver rankings. Make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On Fantasy Football so you get all the latest episodes. And also, if Locked On Fantasy Football made your Spotify Wrapped, you need to prove it on social media to secure a free month of our brand new Everydayer Club. Just tag our National Locked On Podcast Network account on any social platform, and we'll drop you a code. Be one of the first to join the Everydayer Club to get your favorite show ad-free and exclusive access to the members-only Discord channel. You can find that link in the show notes. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.